Hi, my name's Deon Rebello, and I am the CEO of DCX Bullion. I'm actually very privileged today to be, for the first time, interviewing Scott from Loving Life. And the lovely thing is, we've had a relationship through social media where I've been on his channel for a number of times. I think probably for the last 2 years. So it's exciting, Scott. Firstly, welcome back to home to South Africa. I know that you do live in Australia, so your journey back here was quite interesting. But welcome home, and it's lovely to have you, and it's an absolute honor to be interviewing you today.
Well, thank you so much, Deon. And look, I've got to say that it's very strange being on the receiving end of an interview. I'm normally interviewing people. So, anyway, back to you.
Uh, Scott, I think the important thing here and why I actually wanted to interview you was, the story I brought with DCX Bullion and Bullion specifically resonated with you, and there's a lot of tie-in from your background and your history. So, when we had our talks and discussions on your channel, it was always quite easy because you literally I slotted into what you knew, and your authority and what you understood was actually really interesting. Can you just give me a bit of a background to where Scott was? What were you doing? What was your initial interest and fascination with physical bullion?
Sure. Well, when I left school, I went to Barclays Bank and I worked there for 10 years. And I was working at this little Greytown branch, which is right up in the northern part of KwaZulu-Natal. And what happened was I was working on the counter, and one day I saw these little threepenny pieces coming through. And I had an immediate attraction to them. So instead of actually putting them into the collection for the day, I actually bought them and put them aside. And I kept on doing that for years and years and years while I was with the bank. And that's when I grew interested in numismatics. And as a result of that, I then just collected silver coins. And where gold came across, I'd invest in that as well. And over the 10 years, I built up about £150 worth of silver. And it's funny because I moved from Greytown to Copo and then to Escort. And at Escort, there was an accountant there, and he'd see these big bags of silver that I arrived with were put in the bank safe. And he'd say, "Scotty, what's all that?" I said, "Oh, that's the old silver coins." And he'd say, "Scotty, you waste your money. They'll never be worth anything." So I said, "Look, I dare to differ." So whenever the silver coins came through at Escort, I'd keep on buying them. And this guy's name was Eddie, by the way, real character. And I'd buy some silver coins. He'd say, "Scotty, you should come to the bar tonight, have a few beers." I'd say, "No, I'm good." So anyway, I kept on collecting. And one of the things that I realized or learnt as someone who's interested in numismatics is that for every tikkie I bought, the silver in it, which was something like $4 per ounce, meant that the actual value of that coin, just in the silver in the threepenny piece at that time, was 5 times the value. So I was actually getting 12.5 cents every time I bought a 2.5 cent or a tikkie or a threepenny piece. So 5 shilling, when I bought a crown, I was getting about R2.50. And of course, none of these guys realized that. So I just kept on buying this stuff. And then back in 1979, Bunker Hunt tried to corner the silver market.
Yep.
And I was watching the price go up every day. And well, Eddie, the accountant, he started coming around and saying, "Scotty, what's the silver price now?" And I'd say, "Oh, it's gone up another $1 an ounce." And you go, "Sheesh." Whenever you're surprised, you go, "Sheesh." It's like the gods must be crazy, that guy with sheesh. And anyway, during 1979, the silver price just took off. And Eddie was saying, "Gee, how much is your silver worth now?" And I say, "Oh, it's worth about 5,000 Rand. And you've got to remember, back in those days, we were earning about 100 Rand a month as bank clerks. So 5,000 Rand was like over 4 years' salary. And that was just in the silver that I had in the vault. And early in January 1980, I just had this feeling that it was a good time to sell. So I phoned up the silver brokers I was speaking to in Johannesburg. They were absolutely desperate for silver because Bunker Hunt basically had the market cornered. And they immediately did a deal. They paid me over 50 times the value of the silver coins that I'd paid face value for. And the money arrived in my account that day.
Yeah.
And I was sitting there, I was waiting for the money to come through. And of course, because Eddie was the accountant, he would get all the big transfers that came through. And I heard this, sheesh! he came around to my counter. I was on marketing at the front. He said, Scotty, you've just sold your silver. I said, yeah, I've just sold my silver. He said, sheesh, you could have doubled the value. And this is the guy who was saying to me, don't buy silver, come and have a beer. And now he was trying to tell me that I shouldn't have sold. Well, 2 weeks later, the price of silver collapsed. And it went down to $1 an ounce in March that year, March 1980, when the Hunts went bankrupt and they couldn't pay out their loans and so on. And I bought a farm in the Drakensberg. Cost me 10,000 Rand. This is back in 1980.
Yeah.
50 acres. Beautiful views of Champagne Castle. And I then had that farm. I used to go up to it every weekend. And 3 years later, I sold it for 40,000 Rand. So from an investment of basically 150 Rand, I turned that around from silver bullion to 40,000 Rand. And that really got me started. And I've been collecting silver and gold all my life.
Scott, that's an amazing story. And I think what you highlight there also is you bought at the right time.
Yeah.
And interestingly enough, you sold at the right time.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And I think in the future there's going to be no good time to sell, because I think that's where money is going to go. But just for people who are interested in where that property was that I actually bought in the Drakensberg,
Yeah.
it's today called Champagne Lane Resort. And you can actually Google it, Champagne Lane Resort, Champagne Castle, you'll see it there. And it's got a whole lot of houses on it. They now sell for millions of rands each. And in fact, if you go and stay in one of those houses, this is what's so interesting when we talk about value of money. If you go and stay in one of those houses, they're 2,500 Rand per night. So for 4 nights stay in one of those houses,
That's what you paid for the
paid
property.
for the whole property in 1980. That gives you an idea of how money has just debased. Yeah.
And that's also the primary reason of what we do as a business is it's education. And I think what you've really shown is a true story of the value of physical bullion and how it firstly has through time actually negated the losses of what the currencies have. And then I think that's another important aspect. Just out of interest, and I know we had discussed this before, is let's just go back to the history of money. And people say, what's an ounce? What's a troy ounce? And it's very interesting. Give us some insights as to the history behind that.
Sure. Well, the first time silver actually was the first money. Gold actually followed later. And if you go back to 2000 BC, the Sumerians were the first people who actually set up the weights. And the first actual tradable commodity was in Egypt, which was wheat. That was the actual first money. But when it came to something more durable, transportable, because the wheat obviously doesn't stay around forever, they started equating silver to the weight of wheat, because wheat had been the traditional money. And in fact, a gram of silver is 15.43 grains of barley. And the old value of silver was not based on wheat, but on barley. And if you look at the troy ounce, which is 31.1 grams, that's actually exactly 480 barley seeds. That's where the value came from. So that's why the troy ounce, when you go to silver and gold, is a different weight to your traditional ounce,
yes.
which is 28.3 grams. So 480 barley seeds, you can go and weigh them, is actually 1 troy ounce.
Sure, that's amazing. So
and that shows the history, because silver and gold has always worked as money, and it's always been an effective form of exchange. It's always been accepted as money. Whereas if you look at fiat money, which is what we use today, fiat money is bullshit. It's a Ponzi scheme. There's nothing backing it at all. In fact, if you look at your small change that you've got today, it's made out of metals like nickel and really cheap stuff, because it has no real intrinsic value, which is what makes it different to silver and gold.
Interesting enough. So if we take the last 50 years, so we go back to what, 1970, 1972, around there, and we look at what the Rand, the Rand had come into inception in 67.
No, 64.
Yeah.
65.
65.
65, yeah.
So the Rand came into inception in 65.
Hang on, sorry, it was 1961. But you had the gold 1 Rand and then the gold 10 shilling. But the actual silver 1 Rand came out in 1965 as money debased.
Yes.
It moved from gold to silver.
And then, of course, Richard Nixon came in 1971 and declared that the dollar would no longer be held on the gold standard, and took the dollar off the gold standard and effectively changed monetary policy up until today.
Yeah. Well, money today is based on debt. And if you go to a bank to get a housing loan, what they do is they actually secure the asset, which is the house, which has to be valued first. And then they literally create that money out of fresh air, because that money is based on the value of your house. It's based on debt. So money has no real value. It's a debt-based currency, whereas physical gold and physical silver, which you can see here on the table, the actual value is in the metal. And when fiat money collapses, this stuff is going to go through the roof, because it's always been money.
So let's look at that. So if we've seen the growth of silver and gold over that period of time, gold in 1970 or 72 was roughly
about $30 an ounce.
$30 an ounce, right? We're currently looking at gold, and it had peaked to over $2,000 an ounce. There's been a bit of a pullback, but we always say that that's a great buying opportunity.
But the pullback has been relative to the US dollar.
Correct.
Now, if you look at the US dollar relative to currencies like the Rand and the Australian dollar, even though the gold price has pulled back, the actual price in other currency terms has actually still gone north. So that's another factor you've got to bring into account. And that is a critical factor that we need to talk about.
Absolutely. So, and then that's where I wanted to go with this. So if we look at where the Rand was and from its inception to the dollar, it in fact was stronger initially. And if we see how it's gone through over the last 50 years, it slowly got lower and lower in relation to the dollar.
Yeah.
And I mean, we had this discussion before where I told you about where we did that case study on an RA, and we compared the RA's premiums over a 13-year or 14-year period, and it was actual premiums that it was my personal RA.
Yeah.
And, all the values, what in the end, gold, just purchasing physical gold over the same period for the same amount of premiums per month ended up holding far more value than a product that is a retirement annuity that's based in market, with a whole lot of actuaries that develop these products to supposedly grow in wealth. And yet just the devaluation of the Rand to dollar and the natural growth of gold in that same period outperformed that RA hands down.
Yeah, well, look, I'll give you another analogy. Back in the early 1900s, you could buy a tailor-made suit for a couple of dollars. And with the gold, you could buy it with a couple of dollars. Today, to buy a tailor-made suit in America costs you a couple of $1,000s, if not more. With the gold, it's basically the same amount of gold as back in the early 1900s to buy that tailor-made suit, which shows you the devaluation of fiat money over time. So physical gold and physical silver never lose value relative to the purchase of other things. Now, that's before we start looking at the benefits when fiat money collapses, because when fiat money collapses, this stuff is going to go through the roof. But I think we need to talk about the actual relative price of gold to silver.
Yeah. Okay, so let's actually discuss that part,
Yeah.
because I think it's quite important.
Yeah.
You know, I think people, you know, as I've always said, we are about information. We are about empowering people, because information equals power. Information means that people can make more informed decisions about their wealth, about how they actually maintain that wealth in exceptionally uncertain times.
Yeah.
And we're living in a world that is exceptionally uncertain right now, economically, geopolitically, every angle you want to look at it, there's complete unsurety. And if you, at the beginning of this year, when we go and revise all what top analysts, economic analysts, Bullion analysts were saying, not one of them could give a definitive answer, and I'm talking across the board, of where things are going. There's so much unsurety, well, there's so much unsurety as to where things are going. And you know, let's just unpack that ratio between gold and silver. It's very important because it actually gives the price of what gold or silver in relation to gold in actual value, and where that sits in actual value to each other, and then also to the people that want to actually purchase it.
Right. Okay. Well, look, if we look historically, way back when the Egyptians were first using silver and gold as money, the ratio was 1 silver ounce or troy ounce to 1 gold troy ounce. It was on parity.
So it was 1-to-1.
1 to 1. But historically, it's been 10 to 15 silver troy ounce to 1 troy ounce in gold. And that's why we've actually got here the example of 10 silver troy ounce to 1 gold troy ounce. And the importance is that is the historic value comparison between the two metals. At this moment in time, silver is just $20 per troy ounce, whereas gold is $1,830 per troy ounce.
Yeah.
That's 91 of these to 1 of these. That's totally out of whack. Silver is so undervalued.
So, Scott, it's actually a very important thing you raise. So, if we look at that gold-silver ratio, generally in normal times, where the ratio is at its best, is probably in modern times now, I'm saying, is around 35 ounces of silver to 1 ounce gold. Between 35 to about 40 has been where they say that silver is becoming relative in cost, in value to gold. We haven't seen that for a very long time now. It actually, in 2020, in March of 2020, it actually had gone out to its furthest, where it was over 120
Crazy
ounces of silver to 1 ounce of gold.
Yeah.
And there's been a massive pullback, and through the last couple of years, it's been about 70 to 1, 65 was a low point, and now it's pulled back to 80, and now, as you see, back to 90. Yeah. So what does that actually mean? So if I was listening to this right now and saying, okay, what is the relevance for me as wanting to look at purchasing gold, silver? Where is the value?
Well, if you look at 1968, the proportion of silver coins to 1 gold was 17. That's the lowest it's been in a long time.
Yeah.
In 1980, when I sold my silver, it was 38 silver troy ounces to 1 gold.
Yeah.
But as you say, it's gone a lot higher since. But there is one reason that I believe that silver is going to come down when fiat money collapses. It's going to come down much lower than 35 or whatever. I think it's going to come down to close to 20, and I'll tell you why. The problem with gold, when you're using it as money, is that it is so valuable. How do you go and buy something with a 1 ounce gold coin? Because believe me, when fiat money collapses, this gold coin, 1 ounce coin or troy ounce coin here, won't be worth 1,830. It'll be worth an equivalent of purchase, probably 20,000, 30,000. Whereas a silver would be probably worth about, 500, 600 US dollars or something like that. So the value of silver and gold is going to escalate exponentially because it's real money. And you think there's a lot of silver and gold around. There's not. There's a huge shortage right now of the physical metal. Now you're going to have a lot of people who can no longer use the old fiat money trying to get their hands on silver and gold. And there's one old famous adage, supply and demand.
Yeah.
You know?
So interesting enough, saying that silver last year was the first time that there was a deficit. In other words, the demand exceeded the supply. And it's interesting that silver has dropped so low. But we also know this. And from a business perspective, we've always said that silver has great advantages. Where we see it sitting now around $20 to $30 an ounce, it's been sitting in that line or that parameter for the last couple of years. It has dropped under 20 and then pulled back up, gone over 30, but pretty much stayed in the $20 to $30 range. We know that firstly, silver is an investable bullion. You know, it is money, as you say, like gold.
Always
silver
has been money.
Correct. But there's another aspect to silver. Silver is an industrial metal. It's second to oil, is the most used commodity on earth.
Yeah.
We look at the world we're moving into, the more electronic based, more carbon neutral energies coming into play, which opens the gateway for silver to become more and more important. And you know, we foresee that silver will go over $30 an ounce within the near future. A lot of analysts have even said that within the next 3 to 5 years, we could see silver at around $100 an ounce.
Oh, look, I think that's very conservative.
Yeah.
And I just want to raise a point here. And I mentioned portability when it came to gold, trying to dispose of a 1 ounce gold bar. You'd probably be able to buy a house with that. In fact, it's interesting. You could actually buy a house in Germany with a gold sovereign when the currency there collapsed in the 1920s. And that's a fact.
Yeah.
You could go, if someone was desperate for something to actually be able to go and buy stuff with, they would sell their house for a gold coin. That gives you an idea of how things happen when people are desperate, because they need something to feed their family.
Yeah.
And that's what will happen. Now, just talking about portability, there's a very, very important point I want to raise here, because I've been investing in physical silver and physical gold for most of my life. And I have got, just to give you an idea, I've got 1,000 silver crowns. I've got 1,000 of those. You know, the old South African silver crowns?
Yeah.
I've got hundreds of the old half crowns. I've got hundreds of the 2 shillings, because they've got a known amount of silver, and you can then, from that, put a certain amount of value on them. I've got hundreds of the old shillings, the sixpences, the tickies, the threepenny pieces, because the smaller you go, the more portable they are. For example, let's say fiat money collapses. I know that in that silver threepenny piece, if it's pre-1951, when it was 80% silver, there's a gram of silver in that threepenny piece. So I can go into a shop and I can say, hey guys, I want to buy, basket full of groceries. This coin has got a gram of silver in it, and they'll exchange it because it's barter. It's real money.
Yeah.
But you're taking a silver medallion with an ounce, you could probably buy the shop with that when fiat money has collapsed, which really brings us into the importance of having smaller amounts of silver with the ability to actually trade. Now, I believe you're going to be doing something like that, aren't you?
You beat me to it. So, yes, as a business, we got to listen to the market, to our client base. And there's been a massive interest and demand for smaller denominations in silver. We started, our silver range was from an ounce of silver, as you'd mentioned, it's 31.151, but manufacturing, we always round it up, so it's actually 31.2 grams per ounce for us.
You're giving people a bonus.
We have to, by law. We got to comply to the South African Diamond and Precious Metals Regulator, which states that everything we manufacture has to be what we state in weight. If it's half a gram under, we have to scrap that and remanufacture it. So when we manufacture, you always manufacture up to get back down to the actual weight. Yeah. You got to understand when you're pressing, well, firstly, when you're creating the blanks, when you're polishing and pressing, you get losses within the actual weight of the coin. So that's a way that you make sure that you always maintain above the specified weight. So that's an important thing from us. But the interesting thing is the demand on 1 ounce. Well, we started with the 1 ounce. We would go right up to a 2 kilogram bar, and we have a full range of silver in between. And it's been very successful. The 2 kilogram offers massive value. Your silver gram, rand or value per gram is far cheaper than say a 1 ounce. So your on your 2 kilogram bar, the rand per gram or your value per gram is far better than the gram per
Makes
gram
sense,
on an ounce. But that said, it's a far different price point. You're looking at about close to 30,000 rand now for a 2 kilogram bar versus 600 rand for an ounce. So what we've gone and done is we then created a half ounce, but yet there still was a demand for smaller sizes. We've now created a 1/4 ounce, and we've now gone right down to a little gram medallion.
So it's like the threepenny piece.
Correct, and it's fine
fantastic.
silver, so it's
Well, my advice to people listening to this is that you actually get a selection of silver coins with different weights, because then you've got the ability, when fiat money collapses, to take. In fact, it's good to have a lot of the smaller ones, because you can actually then use those for smaller amounts of things to buy. And I mentioned that I've got a lot of tickies, sixpences, shillings, 2 shillings, crowns. It's taken me 30 years to put those together. So forget about going out there and trying to get what we call scrap silver, because numismatic silver, a crown might cost you 50,000 rand because it's a numismatic coin. So getting a silver crown that has only got the value of its silver, they're very, very few and very hard to come by. So the medallion, the 1 gram medallion, to me makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and we've done the same thing for gold. So we also offer a little gold 1 gram medallion.
Excellent.
And we see the demand for it. And again, we've had clients come to us and say, they got a whole bag of coins and what's the value? And they've gone online and they've seen, the 20 cents coins, they look silver. In fact, most of them are nickel. And I say to them, from our perspective, we can only, we focus on precious metals. If there's a precious metal value in it, we will do a buyback on it. But if there isn't, it's of no value to us. So the lovely thing with that is, and as you say, the big problem with a lot of the older coins is people need to know what they have to be informed and to make sure that, because as the years changed, the compositions changed, the percentages changed, more nickel and all those kind of metals were put into those coins. But just going back to the gold silver ratio, where we see it sitting right now around 90 to 1, so 90 ounces of silver to 1 ounce of gold. This right now, and if we talk in dollar terms per ounce, it's $18.30, $18.40 an ounce on gold, and around $20 an ounce on silver. So right now, if we consider where the world is, and I mentioned all that uncertainty of where things are, and globally, there's big problems. I mean, you live in Australia. You understand even from that side, there's a lot of concern as to what is happening in the world. What would be your advice to someone that's listening to this saying, okay, I get it. I see the value of physical bullion. I know that it is a hedge against, especially gold and silver, because they are money. And then, first and foremost, they are used from an investing perspective to control the devaluation of fiat currencies.
Right.
Or the loss of wealth in fiat currencies, like the rand, like the dollar, like the Aussie dollar, and so on. What would be your advice on that?
Well, let me just say before I answer that question, because you raised something that I think we haven't touched on. Back in December 2019, I had a live stream where I was talking to people about investing in physical silver and physical gold. And I remember at that time saying that a troy ounce of gold will cost you 21,000 rand if you buy it right now. That was in December 2019.
Yeah.
And the gold price was about $14.30 US.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, that same 1 troy ounce gold bar today when it's only got up $400, so that's gone up to 18. Well, it's less. Yeah, it's about $400. So it's about US dollars 18.30 today. That same gold bar, because of the way the rand has collapsed against the US dollar, will now cost you over 50% more. It'll cost you 34,000 rand.
Yeah.
So what you're actually doing by buying gold and silver is you're getting yourself out of a shit situation with the South African rand,
Yeah.
and you're actually investing in something that is backed by the US dollar. But again, once fiat money collapses, it won't be backed by the US dollar. It'll just be a commodity that everybody wants because it's real money, and there's no alternative. They're talking about a central bank digital currency that they want to bring in, but the Nigerian population, where they did the trials, they've actually basically said we're not interested, and they're having a lot of flack in trying to actually bring that in. So as fiat money collapses, I don't see an alternative to gold and silver. In fact, China and Russia are now backing their currencies by gold.
Yeah, and what's interesting is if you see the trend, even throughout the European central banks over the last three quarters, the amount of buying of gold into their reserve banks. And I always say this to people, pay attention to what's happening around you. When you see big institutions such as reserve banks or your big financial institutions starting to allocate a lot of their portfolios or their holdings into gold, they're doing it for a reason. They want to negate any massive losses that their currencies would have if there is a massive drop in value. So that right now, and the fact that it's happening, I mean, on a monthly basis, and we get the World Gold Council reports on a monthly basis. So we see exactly what's happening, who's been purchasing in metric tons of gold on a monthly basis. And you can see all the reserve banks, even Turkey and a number of other countries. So we can see that there's something going on. And again, we always talk about information equaling power. And for me, this is another thing, is when people say, as you mentioned, gold is expensive, but that's why we say we now can offer you a gram of gold. We also got other products where you can actually buy grams of gold on a monthly basis, which allows you at far cheaper price points, but you're owning physical gold. And this is the massive drive. And let's come and bring it now into South Africa. We, as a country, have just gone through a grey listing, which essentially means that we are now further down that cliff, a fiscal cliff.
You're right on the edge.
Well, I think we're really starting to slip, and we're grabbing on the sides as we fall.
Well, with the ANC here, good luck.
And this is the problem, is we've hit that point now, and you can see it as the average person in the street. There's concern. You got families, you got children, you got investments, you got all these things, and now what happens if the rand does start to fall? We see that it's sitting around $18.50 a rand to the dollar right now. We know that, and we as a business have been saying this for the last 3 years, the rand is going to fall. Get your wealth out of rands.
Now, you asked me the question, what's my advice to people? And I'd like to answer that on that point. I'll tell you what I've done, and it's always worked for me. What I've done, it's not just the rand that's in trouble. The Australian dollar's in trouble.
It's a global thing.
The whole fiat system is in trouble. Singapore, today is, I think, the 10th of March, 2023.
Correct.
Okay, just so we take this. Singapore this week has bought 200 tons of gold. That's Singapore, the country. It bought 200 tons of gold. Now, that's a huge amount of gold for a little state like Singapore to buy. Clearly, they see the value in buying gold. But my strategy in the last, all my life, I've been buying physical silver and physical gold. Never let me down. But my strategy right now is to make sure that I have minimal cash in the bank, because if the fiat money collapses, that bank that you trusted, the Standard Bank, the ABSA, the Capitec, whichever bank it is, you'll go there with let's say you got 100,000 rand in the bank, and they'll say, sorry, you're bankrupt. You've lost your money. It's gone.
And Scott, let's just also contextualize this. This has happened in modern times.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
So you know what we're saying is not something that is impossible and it won't happen,
Well, I'll
because
go
the
further than
biggest
that.
problem
I'll go
is
further.
most of those banks
Yeah,
don't hold physical cash.
they
It's all
don't.
digital. But expand on that, please.
Well, there have been literally hundreds of attempts to make fiat money work. This is not the first time fiat money has been tried. It's been tried right through the centuries, hundreds of times, and every single time it's collapsed. So, if you look at the track record of fiat money, there's never been one that's been successful. The normal lifespan of a fiat money system is about 50 years.
It's actually even less. It's around 25 to 30 years but we know it's problematic.
It doesn't last. Yeah.
No.
And you can see now with America, with their debt, it's just going up exponentially. And you can't carry on like that. So the beauty about physical silver and physical gold is there's only so much of it around, because you can't just print it like you can digital money. So it's a known quantity. There's going to be a huge shortage, because you're going to have all these people who had money in fiat trying to track down some real money, which is physical gold and physical silver.
So interesting about that, and this is also a common trend. We're talking trends now, and we always look at the Minsky model of booms and busts. And it's a traditional model that actually is well documented and has a good understanding of cycles in the stock markets.
Yeah.
So everything rises and everything falls.
Yeah.
And they go through those cycles. But the important thing here is, and we know this, as soon as there is a massive market correction, be it a recession, I mean, the Fed is already saying the US is about to go into a recession. They're in denial, let's be blunt here, that the recession had already started. In this country, we are already in a recession. As far as growth GDP, we had said that we would be growing at 0.9%. It's now dropped to 0.7% on their projections of what they originally projected. And that came through this week.
Yeah.
So we're in trouble. Globally, there's also trouble. So we know that the markets will, if there is this correction or a massive pullback or depression, to whichever angle you want to look at it, there is something coming. We know that gold and them will also fall with them, but the difference is the uptake on those commodities will be parabolic. In other words, as you mentioned, an ounce of gold could go to $40,000 an ounce or $20,000 an ounce.
The sort of the comparison of 40,000, because the US dollar won't be worth anything. So let's say you've got a gold troy ounce, which is worth, let's say, $2,000 US, just round figures. Fiat money collapses. With that one troy gold ounce, you'd probably be able to go out to someone who's desperate for cash, who's got a house, and say, look, I'll exchange this to you for your house. And depending on how desperate they are, they'll say, yeah, okay, I'll take it, because he's got something he can go and buy something with.
Yeah.
Because, money will not be available outside silver and gold.
Yeah, and I've said this to you before. I hope to God we don't get to a point where there's a complete collapse of the system. Yeah. Is it likely or probable? We can't say no, but the reality is we also need to make sure people negate losses. So be it, as you say, with the banking system, there is it's highly likely that they might get to a point, and we've seen it in modern history, where people go to ATMs and they can't withdraw their money.
Yeah.
And then suddenly they go to the bank and the bank says, sorry, we cannot give you your money.
Yeah.
So the important thing here is, and we always look also what is advised on bullion holdings within a portfolio. And they roughly say around 20% of your holdings should be in physical bullion. Now, of course, there are other people that would expand on that, but we also, as I've always said to you, we come from trying to be as measured and as middle of the road as possible. If we, like I've mentioned before, the likes of a Robert Kiyosaki, he calls a market crash every single week. He's going to get it right eventually. It's coming.
I'm interested you mentioned Robert Kiyosaki, because he's a guy who wrote Rich Dad, Poor Dad.
Yeah.
And he's a very, very smart man. He's made millions out of investing the right way. And if you go to YouTube and you just type in Robert Kiyosaki and you go and listen to some of his videos about why he is investing in physical gold and physical silver, you see what we're talking about here is exactly what the smart people are talking about.
Yeah. But again, as I said, and I am a big follower of him from when he released his books. As a young man, I read those books and was inspired to see investing in that way. And I mean, this was in a couple of years ago. He came to South Africa to give one of those talks on wealth.
Yeah.
And at the end of the talk, he put up a big stop. Sorry.
Cut.
Yeah.
Yeah.
At the end of the conference, he put up a slide that said, silver is bigger than property.
Mm-hmm.
And so he's been a massive advocate of silver based on its value proposition in relation to gold. It is a very accessible, a precious metal, for the man in the street from a money price point perspective. So, Robert Kiyosaki, I fully understand. But when I also then look at the other side, the far more conservative people that, Christian Jeffries, who is the CEO of the CPM, which is the company that owns the COMEX, the commodity
exchange.
The commodity exchange in the US. He has even said that they are viewing this time as very unstable and very uncertain. They've even revised their projections for gold to go to over $2,000 an ounce. And they are exceptionally conservative in their outlooks.
Can I just say that what he said is right on the money. I don't know how many people have heard of the World Economic Forum, but their head is Klaus Schwab. Now, people might say, who the heck is the World Economic Forum? Well, let me tell you, your political leaders go to Davos every year to get their instructions from the World Economic Forum. So, these aren't Mickey Mouse. These are the people who are pushing for a one world government. Now, Klaus Schwab is on the record of saying that by 2030, you will own nothing, but you will be happy. So between now and 2030, the financial system has got to collapse. That's what he's saying, in effect. And if you don't have physical silver and physical gold where the value is in the actual coin that you're holding, there's no other form of money that'll be around. And you mentioned what's my advice to people. I mentioned about buying physical gold and physical silver. I would be putting most of my spare cash into those metals, but any other cash, and this is really important too, is that just like having the 1 gram silver coins.
Sorry, Scott, just... Yeah. Sorry, Molly. We can hear that.
Oh, yeah.
Sorry.
Okay. So where was I when we...
Where was Scott?
Okay, well, let me go from Klaus Schwab.
Yeah, okay, so from Klaus Schwab's.
Yeah, okay.
Okay,
so Klaus Schwab, who heads up the World Economic Forum, is on the record of saying that by 2030, you, as a useless eater, that's what he calls us in his book, COVID-19 and the Great Reset, you will own nothing, but you'll be happy. In other words, between now and 2030, the fiat monetary system will have collapsed. And you might say, oh, that's a conspiracy theory. But these guys are working for the one world government. And your political leaders are going to their meeting every year at Davos. So clearly they have sway on what's happening. It's important that people realize that things are not what they appear to be. There's a level of information that you are not privy to. And the big thing that is going to be attacked in the next few years is fiat money. And I'm willing to put my life on it because that's what's going to happen. So getting back to how would I invest if I was someone listening to this, I would put most of my free cash that I've had hovering around doing nothing, I'd put that into physical silver, physical gold, break it up into small amounts of like 1 gram silvers, so you can trade with them easily, going up to the 1 troy ounce. Same with the gold, get the 1 gram gold medallions that DCX do, going up to the 1 ounce, depending on how much money you've got. But that will restore its value, and in the time of a monetary collapse will just go through the roof. The other thing that I would do, importantly, is that let's take South Africa. Say the lights do go out permanently. That piece of plastic in your pocket won't be worth a cent. And of course, you won't be able to get your money out the banks. So what I would be doing is I would be getting any other spare cash I've got into cash, into 200 Rand notes, into 100 Rand notes, into 50 Rand notes, into 5 Rand coins, 2 Rand coins. You need a lot of change, because when the lights go out and the banks collapse, stores will still accept fiat money in cash, because it's guaranteed by the government. So it'll still be tradable. And of course, you just keep your silver and the gold on the side until such time as even the paper money goes. But by having a lot of small change, you don't go into a shop like a spaza shop and say, I want a loaf of bread with a 200 Rand note. And the guy looks at you and says, you got to be joking. I don't have any change. So it's like having a useless note. So having a lot of change is very important. I've been actually collecting change in Australian coinage for years now. And I've got about $300 in the $2 coins. I've got about $100 in the $1 coin, and etc., all the way down to the 5-cent piece. So when these times come, I can go to a shop and I can give the exact change. And I think that's the other part of my advice that I'd give to people.
Scott, just on from a personal side, you now live in Australia.
Yeah.
You're still very much involved within South Africa through your channel.
Yeah.
You got a very big following, and they're very, sorry, what's the word? Faithful, not faithful. Loyal.
We
Okay.
better cut.
And you have a following that is exceptionally loyal.
Mm-hmm.
For me, what else would you say would be of massive value to the people that you feel is important? If you had to give them literally a sum up of where we are right now, your biggest concerns, and then, as you've mentioned, start to allocate bits of money and things like that. Be prepared. And for me, my biggest thing is I keep saying to people need to wake up. They need to realize that this is happening. And if we don't take charge and take control of our destiny, we're going to be left further and further behind. So from your side, what else would you suggest?
Well, I'd suggest everybody follow lovinglifetv.com, because we don't only just talk about silver and gold and investing in precious metals. We talk about what's going on in the world today, what's going on with this COVID situation, and should you or shouldn't you get your children vaccinated? Just for the record, I would say no, don't even go there. But we cover a lot of stuff from an alternative perspective. And a lot of people might say, well, that's all conspiracy theories. Well, let me tell you, with COVID-19, all those so-called conspiracy theories have turned out to be true. For example, the vaccine doesn't work. The vaccine doesn't stop transmission. The vaccine is not safe. And not only that, but the vaccine will not stop you giving granny COVID-19, which was the whole basis of why they were pushing the vaccine in the first place, you might recall on television.
Yeah.
So we were sold a lie, and people need to understand that I call it the fake mainstream media. They're just following the agenda of those people in the background. People say, there are people in the background controlling the world today. And my understanding from a very, very reliable source is that one of the shadow government members or ministers who has already been put in place is Bill Gates for the one world government. They've already got people in place. And that's why when Bill Gates comes on television, he speaks with such authority about everything and anything, as if he's a highly qualified epidemiologist or a doctor, because he is going to be the guy who will be running that particular aspect of our lives under a one world government. And this is what's planned under the World Economic Forum. And this is why I know fiat money is going to collapse, because this is what they're planning. And by having precious metals, you've actually got that financial independence.
Talking about that, and I want to also just go into that part, but what's interesting, and we've seen this even a trend with people that contact us, is we're starting to see that there are more and more people realizing that they need to start taking the responsibility for their own destiny.
Absolutely.
And we start to see groups forming, similar like-minded people saying, we need to have a community around us that can support us when we go through these things. And I'm experiencing this literally on a daily, a weekly, monthly basis, where we're getting people phoning, can you present to a group, those kind of things. So there's a definite, and the shift to precious metals as a stability, as a wealth, something that can maintain wealth through these times. But just interesting enough, on your, with regards to the Economic Forum and the One World Government, with Russia doing what they're doing and China sitting in the back watching this happen. I mean, as far as the BRICS nations, and South Africa is the S on the BRICS nations, we tend to sit on a fence that holds hands with the US and the UK as far as getting, as far as our biggest trading partners, yet we are also very much holding the hand of China and Russia at the same time. At some point, there's going to be a breaking point. Is Russia just trying to break what you believe as this one world government?
That is an amazing question. Let me tell you something, that the US Secretary of State, Blinken, is on the record as saying that the war in Ukraine is the greatest threat to a new world order. He actually said that publicly. And the reason he said that is because what Russia has done, it's like a wounded bear that's now fighting back, because NATO are trying to move into their territory, like Ukraine. And Russia said, And if you think of the Cuban Missile Crisis that happened in the early 1970s, America, when Russia were going to put missiles on Cuba, they actually threatened that they would actually start a nuclear war. That's because Americans said, no, you're not going to do that. Now, what NATO are doing is they're doing exactly the same on Russia's doorstep. And, of course, Putin has said, no, we're not going to allow that. And that's why the war in Ukraine is happening. But what Russia and China have done, or what America has done, is they've actually forged a huge alliance between Russia and China and the other BRICS nations. South Africa, for example, supports Russia subversively. And then you've got India, which is basically buying Russian oil when they're not supposed to be. So the BRICS countries are actually right behind Russia. And if they go ahead and bring out a gold-based ruble, and the Chinese the same with a gold-based renminbi, believe me, now that you've got countries like Iran and Saudi Arabia saying, we will accept your currency in exchange for oil, whereas the petrodollar, the US dollar, is based on every oil producer only accepting US dollars, it's going to undermine the US dollar, and the US is going to collapse. And the depression will make the 1930s look like a cakewalk. It's going to be a heck of a lot worse. The US was going to collapse. It's going to implode. And that's why Blinken said that this war in Ukraine, if we lose it, it's the end of the New World Order, because basically the New World Order has been run by organizations like the Central Intelligence Agency, the FBI, who are acting on behalf of these groups like the Council of 300 and stuff like that, and the World Economic Forum. And the United Nations is their front. In fact, the land that the UN is built on in New York is owned by the Rockefellers. Not many people know that. And in fact, the Rockefellers built the UN building. And if you go and have a look at the UN building, you'll see there's that beast that the Bible describes. It's a sculpture right outside it. And, this is a satanic organization that are trying to destroy the world. And as I said earlier, we are useless eaters. We're completely disposable. If you go to lovinglifetv.com, you'll see so much evidence of what's actually happening in the world today that the mainstream media are not talking to you about.
Sure, Scott. I'm gonna go and go and see the picture of, and to see that sculpture that you're talking about.
Yeah. It's got the hooves of a bear. It's got the head of a lion. It's got all these different animals built into it. It's described perfectly in Revelations in the Bible, and it's sitting outside the UN.
Okay.
And look, there's so many other examples I could give you where you can just see who's running this one world government.
So, we coming to the end of this interview, but I think for me, I'd like to maybe just wrap it up on your thoughts again, just on a couple of things. But, regardless of whatever does happen, we as a society, we as communities need to start taking control. I think COVID, however you want to look at it, has created that sense of community. People are rallying together, realizing that banks, governments can't actually look after their interests anymore. And I think that, and this is my own personal belief, that bullion, physical bullion, does give you access to controlling your wealth, or to maintain your wealth in these very uncertain times. Just any thoughts as we close this interview down, with regards to that?
Sure. Well, look, there's something I just want to show people. And I talked about barley. That's what barley seeds look like. And when you think that the whole system of money, when we talk about gold and silver based on troy ounces, is based on the barley seed and the history of money. Just getting back to your question there, I just feel that when we look going forward, if you've got a family, if you've got, if you want to ensure your future, you're crazy not to actually put that into real money, because fiat money is bullshit money.
Scott, I mean, for me, I am a father, I've got children, and, I think over the last year, especially over this last year, the realization that things are not getting better, they are getting worse. And I am an internal, if not an internal optimist, sorry. What's the saying? You are an...
Eternal optimist.
It is eternal optimist.
Yeah.
Eternal.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Eternal, yeah.
We have an audience.
I am an eternal optimist. And for me, I think the realization of what's happened and where we are, South Africa and globally, has really shook me and made me more concerned, but also more determined to get this message out, that people need to firstly wake up and they need to start taking control of their own destinies and their own wealth. And for me, history has proven it time and time again that physical bullion does negate losses that fiat currencies can't. And at the end of the day, like you've given examples where, say we have a complete collapse of the system and we are down to a bartering environment or bartering world.
Your best investment will be
physical bullion.
Yeah. Now, look, I just want to say that when it comes to looking ahead, people need to know that I'm a critical thinker. I don't just follow what's served up. I look between the lines. I've got a huge amount of intuition. And people who follow Loving Life TV know that I don't think we've ever got anything wrong. We basically warned people about the COVID vax, and this was back in 2020. We warned people about other things. We've been talking about what's going on a global scale. And it's funny how the fake mainstream media always say, oh, that's just a conspiracy theory. And then when it actually comes out, it's almost like, actually, this is what's going on, But there's no apology to people because they've actually been covering up in the meantime. And I think that's been the strength of our platform on the internet, because people can go there, and even if they don't agree with what I say in a video or the information we produce, at least it gives them another perspective. Because if you don't have differing perspectives, which is strange because that's what you call following the science. And during COVID, they shut down any alternative opinion. So the science was never followed when it came to the vaccine or COVID-19. YouTube shut down anyone who put out an opinion which was different to the World Health Organization, for example. So our information has been very, very controlled. And a huge part of that is how absolutely critically damaged the fiat money system is right now. And if you think that it's going to continue like it is for the next 10 years, well, good luck. Now's the time, while you still can, to get into precious metals, because you will never regret it.
Scott, I really want to thank you for your time. It's been a privilege. I know that you came into South Africa unannounced to the majority of people that know you. So the fact that we, DCX Bullion, were able to get an interview with you, I am tremendously appreciative of you taking out this time for us. And again, we have got a history where we've been on your channel, and I always love our conversations. You pushed my thoughts on how I see things, and for me, I like that. I don't believe that I know everything and my views are the right way, and I believe you got to have an open mind. So you definitely add that other side of it. Sometimes a lot of what you say is actually quite terrifying, and for me, it does leave me those thoughts that there are things to think about. But again, thanks a million for your time today.
I'll just close by saying that anyone who's prepping because they're worried about their food supply in these times, if you're putting food away for the future, that's your prepping for your finances, silver and gold.
Great. Thanks again, Scott, and I really do appreciate your time, and look forward to chatting to you again.
Okay, fantastic. Thanks, Deon.
Thank you, Scott.